my cap off.
Today is February the 1st, 2012. My name is Dr. Michael Berna, and I'm here today on behalf of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project, a project that captures and archives the oral histories of the men and women who served in one or more of our nation's conflicts. We're in Monessen, Pennsylvania, at the Monessen Heritage Museum today to interview Mr. Mike Yusko, Jr., a veteran of the 8th Defense Battalion in World War II. Welcome, Mr. Yusko, and thank you for agreeing to share your military experiences with the rest of the nation. I'd like to start with your background, beginning where you were born and raised.
I was born and raised in Monessen, and my mother and dad broke their marriage up. So my dad raised my brother and I was the oldest of the family. I was 5.5 years old, and then we were just boarding around. And then, being my dad liked to drink a lot, so naturally we were kicked out. So then finally he went into 2 rooms right across the street from 17th Street Gate, Labonich's place. So that's where we were living there for a few years. And then we moved up on Highland, and I was in CC camp in 1941. And should I tell about the Fort Necessity?
Sure.
And 3 of us from Monessen, we came home for the weekend from Virginia after we were there for 2 months. So they allowed us to go home for the weekend. And we were thumbing rides. And then when we were going back, we stopped at Fort Necessity. And Fort Necessity was 4 times larger than it is today, even though they tell the people it's the original sign. But the original place now, if you put 4 or 5 horses in there and 10 men, it would be crowded. But at that time, they went all the way down to the spring because you had to have water running through. Mm-hmm. And when I told that to the historian there, he says, "I'm glad you didn't bring it up with the other people who were here to see it." Well, I kept quiet until the other people left. And I kept telling him that. And he said, "My goodness, you know more about this place than I know." Well, I used to go to the Indian doctor across the street to get shot. Well, that was after the war. I went to the Indian doctor. He moved from Perryopolis, and he was good on herbs. And I had hay fever, rose fever, grass fever. And I lied when I went into the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned CC. You were in CC.
I was in CC camp.
And what? And CC stood for, what was that?
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Right. And what did you do there?
I was, as you go up to Skyline Drive, there's a big restaurant and hotel there, and then there was a park where people went to eat in the park. And some of the bugs were like sticks. They were that long, and they crawled on 4 legs. Well, and my job was to clean the garbage and the picnic ground up because people left a mess, even though garbage cans were there. But it was my job, and my job was to clean the ladies' room and the men's room. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Every other day. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I had a small log cabin with a wheelbarrow and enough room for me to lay down in a wheelbarrow to rest a little bit, you know. And then the CC truck, but that was 20 miles away. So the CC truck would always pick me up to take me back to the camp. Camp Redbird was the name.
Camp Redbird?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long were you in CC?
I was only in there about 4.5 months because I wanted to go play football. I put on some weight while I was in the mountains. So with that peanut butter and that, well, they called it something else, but salami and peanut butter, salami, and Spam sandwiches, and maybe 1 apple or 1 orange, mm-hmm. or 1 pear. Mm-hmm. And it was a brown bag that we had to take with us. Mm-hmm. But it was a good life.
Yeah.
It was a good life.
And that was during the Depression.
It was during the Depression. Well, it was after Depression. The war just started.
Okay.
The war just, no. United States wasn't in a war yet, but everybody was going into the, I'll be back in a year, little darling,
Mm-hmm.
you know, going in for service.
Right.
But then the war started after that.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother-in-law was in Africa, George Lucas. The United States wasn't in a war yet.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother-in-law was fighting the Germans, but he had to have an English Tammy on him. And he was fighting the Germans.
Hmm.
And the United States wasn't, they'll probably cut this out.
Fine. No.
The United States never lies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They
Right.
never lie.
So were you drafted into the military?
I was drafted because I lied. One school teacher embarrassed me in school because I was already 17 and I was only in the 9th grade. And she embarrassed me. You're 17, 2 years older than the rest of these kids. What are you trying to do, make out with the girls? And she embarrassed me. And I washed my own clothes on a washboard. I ironed them. My dad and my brothers. In fact, one of the school teachers had me up as an example because some of the girls were putting powder over their neck and had covering up their dirty necks. So the school teacher by the name of Mrs. Sclove, Jewish teacher, at that time you can embarrass the kids in school. Today, my cousin that was a professor in college, she says you can't even mention that they have a dirty neck. So she embarrassed all those girls that you're going to be future mothers and wives, and here's a boy that washes his own clothes, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness!
Mm-hmm. So you were 17 then,
And so she embarrassed me. So I forged my birth certificate. I quit the school that next day, and that day I quit. I walked out of school. So I went down to get a job in a steel mill, and forged my birth certificate. I think it was 2.5 months or 3 months. 2.5 months, I think. I forged my birth certificate, and they gave me a job because they needed men in a mill.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked in the shell department where they made shells, and then I got a job in the armor-piercing shell, cutting slugs.
Mm.
And then the machine shop down at Christie Park had to sharpen them up, you know, and make them to fit into the casing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the other part of the mill would burst open, and that would, if it hit a plane, it would knock the plane out of the air.
Mm-hmm. And which steel mill was that you were working for?
Pittsburgh Steel, right here in Menneson.
Okay.
Pittsburgh Steel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you work there?
Till I think about 8 months, 7 months or 8 months, until I was already 18, but they drafted me, so there was about 250 going, and they asked for in Greensburg, they asked for volunteers who wants to go into the Marine Corps, and I told them I want to go to the Marine Corps because I want to fight Japs, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you didn't feel bad about being drafted? You were okay with that?
I was okay because I came from a poor family, and $42 every 2 weeks was my pay. Boy, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
You went to the store and you bought 2 bags full of groceries, and about for say $8. 2 bags today with $8. What can you buy?
Not much. Not much. So then,
am I talking too much?
No, you're fine. You're fine. In Greensburg, you went from Greensburg. You left out from Greensburg.
No. From Greensburg, they sent us down on a bus down to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
To the Marine Corps, and the fellow that came from. Could I go a little further?
Sure.
The fellow that came from Mon City, he came from Europe, near from where my dad come from.
Mm-hmm.
He was only 10 years old.
Mm.
When he was 12 years old, he was working in a coal mine down at Black Diamond, because they had kids working at that time. That's why the big coal mine owners were so darn rich. And
sure.
They only were making 10 cents an hour, 8 cents an hour.
Right.
So he was down there also, but he he got his head broke open by a coal and iron cop. They rode on horses, and they had bobbies, hats just like the English cops do. And he saw 2 stones in the kid's hands. But one guy handed him the 2 stones after somebody hit the horse, and the horse reared up. So when the iron and coal cop saw that kid with the 2 stones, he went over and broke his head open, 32 stitches.
Wow.
The mother had to carry him he got 32 stitches. So then when he was 28 years old, the coal mine caved upward, which is the worst. If it caves downward, you can easily find the people. But if it caves upward, from the pressure of the coal mine going upward, it's rough to find people. So Bill Urban was his name, Slavish fella.
Okay.
And he got a stainless steel pin in his ankle. Now he's 32 years old, working in the mines, but when the Japs attacked, he wanted to go down. And when he went down, because I had that news reporter, Imogene Lullick, and by the name, her last name is Bat, the flying bat, Lillick, in our language.
Okay.
So anyway, she gave him a big write-up later on at a Marine Corps birthday ball. But anyway, he went down Pittsburgh to fight Japs. And naturally, he's 32 years old. He's going to tell him he's 32. But the sergeant there, Marine sergeant, refused to take that guy that was 32 years old. He says, if you was 31, we'd slip you under the wire. But he says, you're 32, you're too old.
Too old.
So when Bill got there, he told him he was 30 years old.
Okay.
So he got past. Now they're all in the nude, 50 of them in line. And the doctor says, jump on your left leg. Well, he jumped on his left leg. Then the doctor says to these 50 fellows, jump on your right leg. And Bill jumped on his left leg again. So the doctor caught him. He went up to him and he says, a young fella, how come you jumped on your left leg? Did you misunderstand me? Because Bill couldn't speak good, what you call good English at that time. He spoke good enough, but not good enough. And the doctor says, you're a coal miner. Well, you can get deferred. And Bill said, no, I don't want to be deferred. I want to go fight Japs. But he says, if you go down to Pappas Island, they'll flunk you. He said, doctor, how about passing me and let me go down to Pappas Island? If they flunk me, I'll come home and go to work in the mines. 3.5 years later, he come out of the service after the war was over.
So were you in Pappas Island at the same time as he was?
No. I was a little later.
Okay.
But he was when we had the Devil Dog detachment in Monessen in 1945, 46, 47, 48. Well, I moved out of Monessen. I had a farm here, Scottdale. So Bill, I couldn't understand how he could sell 600 tickets. And Jack Snyder from Monessen says, well, Mike, if you was a policeman, you'd be able to sell that many tickets too. So Bill was a big salesman. So after I moved out and went to work for Fairless, across the river from Trenton, New Jersey, I would come home every 6 weeks and take my mother-in-law to the doctors, and 2.5 acres of ground up there. I would cut the grass and stuff. And so I went down to the police station to see Bill because he was chief of police, but he was off that day. He was in his overalls. And by the grace of God, he's coming across the street, and I'm going back to the doctor's office. Hey, Bill. Hey, he always called me Mikey. He said, Mikey, how are you? I didn't see you for a long time. So I told him where I live. And we got to talking and all that, you know. And then, well, he told me all that story before, you know.
Right.
Anyway, then I didn't get to see him again until I came back to Monessen after 33.5 years and helped get this Mon Valley Leatherneck started.
Well, let's go back to when you left to go to Pappas Island.
All right.
You left out of Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
And you took a train. How did you get to Pappas Island?
Well, by train.
Okay.
There was Nick Zordich from Menneson, Andy Lazar from Menneson, and Dick Dancer from Menneson, Jim Heppel, and Clifford White. Clifford White was a colored guy, very intelligent fellow, but he wanted to go fight Japs.
Mm-hmm.
But little did we know that when we got down to Pappas Island, they separated the colored guys to another camp.
They segregated. There was
We
segregation
were
in the military.
segregated. And we couldn't believe it because we played ball here in Menneson together, we fought together and all that, you know.
Right, so that was your first experience with,
Oh,
with
yeah,
segregation.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So after we had 11 months of training.
And how was that training?
Well, we asked the DI about the blues, about the dress blues, because everybody thought they were going to get dress blues. And the DI says, yeah, you're going to get blues at 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were in a World War I barracks, which was a wooden barracks 3 feet off the ground. Other Marines were in the Quonset huts or the wooden barracks, the brand new double deckers. But we were in the World War I. And when I got discharged, I wanted to see that. And they says, we went down there about a few years later, and they said, oh, they burned them up right after the war was over. They burned them up.
Okay, so you...
Yeah, because we had what they call a holy stone to deck with a brick. You had to clean the floor with a brick and water to make it almost look white. Well, yellow, you know. Some places you'd be rubbing too hard, and you would actually wear out the wood.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So your training, what was it rough? Was your training tough?
Yes. Every 4 o'clock in the morning, you had to get up, make your bed with the hospital corners, like a hospital, and if the DI would throw a 50-cent piece, that blanket was so stiff that 50-cent piece would bounce on her. If it fell flat, you better make your bed over. Plus, you got extra work to do after working hours.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times we went to get like they would preach us inside of a building. A lot of us were falling asleep because getting up 4 o'clock in the morning and don't go to bed till 9 o'clock at night. You know, you don't get much sleep.
No, you don't.
And then you got to march in that sand. And at that time, they were making the Pappas Island bigger, so it was all bulldozer, no green grass, no trees. And we were on a firing line. So I had to be in a prone position, that's flat on your stomach,
Okay.
shooting for 2 hours while President Roosevelt was running around in a car inspecting the grounds. So you had to keep looking like you're busy all the time. Now this is in March, because I went in February, and this is in March, and we were ready to graduate. So they says, okay, get up. I couldn't get up. I was cold down to the ground in March.
Yeah.
So the 2 guys had to pick me up. Well, not only me, but about 6 of us. They had to pick us up. So move around, you know, get the blood circulating.
Right, right.
But at that time, they said, I don't want you to even look up to see if Rose. And man, I was dying to see President Roosevelt.
Sure.
The only time I've seen him was in the movies or the pictures.
And here he was right on the island with you, but yeah, you couldn't see him.
We weren't allowed to see him.
Weren't allowed to see him.
So then when we graduated, Andy Lazar, he got, well, I don't want to get too far about him.
Well, yeah, how about when you so how long was basic training?
Well, we only had 11 months.
11 months.
You're supposed to have like 13.
Okay.
And we only had 11.
Okay.
There was a war on.
Okay, so by then the war was going pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But then we were still on the defensive side.
Right.
And then we went to San Diego, cross country, and our train was late one time because when the ammunition train was coming by, they would move the troop train way over, just in case something would happen to the ammunition train. It would kill all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So they put us way on the side, and for about 2 hours or 2 or 3 hours, we were actually sidetracked.
Hmm.
So they had to feed us in a Pullman car. No. They didn't have a Pullman car at this time. And we had 21 prisoners, which were Marines. They got drunk. They fought in the because we went. Oh, I'm sorry. We went to school, 40 millimeter school, and that's where I met my gunnery sergeant and Ed Sable, that was from Monessen. They were in Pearl Harbor when the Japs attacked, and then when they went to Midway, the Japs attacked again.
Everywhere they went.
And they had this English helmets on, which wasn't protective for the ears. So a lot of those guys wore a half a sandbag filled with sand over their hats to cover their ears, because the concussion from the bombs were deadly.
Mm-hmm.
And but they were lucky when they broke the code that the Japanese were going to attack Iwo Jima.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, not Iwo Jima. I just named the island.
Midway.
Midway.
Mm-hmm.
Which today there's no military there. There's only Goonie birds there. That's all. So then
You were on your way to San Diego with the train.
we were on our way to San Diego. So it took about 10 days, because we had to always go on the side when either a big troop train was coming through or ammunition train.
Okay.
And then they had that big explosion in Texas where the ships collided or something, and it was just terrible.
Wow.
But anyway, then we got into San Diego, and it was we were there about 2 days, and San Diego, you saw the arches of San Diego Marine Corps base,
Mm-hmm.
them arches.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had netting over that and over the big building, and then they had a little house like on top of the netting. It was camouflaged. So if the Japs or the Germans would come by, all they'd see is plain field with a little house up on a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And right next door, they were making B-24s and B-25s.
Okay.
And I even told the guys, my God, every hour on the hour they would put out a plane. I
That's
said,
amazing.
boy, I hope those planes take off right away, because they would clean all our pyramidal tents out.
Okay.
But every time we marched, we had to march under that netting. So and no plane up on top could see us marching.
Right.
Yeah. So from what I was told, about 6 months later, one B-25 didn't make it up and cleaned all those pyramidal tents out. It's a good thing those guys were out in bivouacking, or they would have killed all them guys.
Is that right?
There.
So from San Diego, how long were you in San Diego then?
We were there, well, from San Diego we went up to, right now it slips my mind, the pyramidal tent. We were there for about a week, and we went through some little rough training.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to go into a training. They showed you a football game, play by the rules. Baseball game, basketball, play. Now they showed us film. You don't play by the rules. You throw sand in their face, you spit, or you kick them in their private, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You either kill or
Self-defense.
be killed.
Self-defense.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were taught.
Mm-hmm.
You either kill or be killed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we were up there about 2 weeks. Camp Linda Vista, which was near Camp Elliott, which was the women Marines took over Camp Elliott. Because one day I was walking backwards and talking to my 3 buddies, and these girls were marching, but they were like silent marching.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't making any noise. And all of a sudden, I'm in their way. I got the hell out of there real fast. Excuse me for cursing. I got out of there real fast, and they laughed like heck. Even the captain of the ladies Marine, she laughed. She said, "That'll get you on your toes, Marine." So after that, we left on the ship at 10 o'clock at night, and we ate pork chops and stuff. They fed us, and we were down 3 decks below. And it was a German ocean liner that was captured in the Gulf of Mexico, and the United States turned it into a warship, not a warship, a transport to haul us Marines overseas. So it took us, the next morning they said hit the deck, 5 o'clock in the morning. Man, I sat up. I fell backwards. I got seasick. And there was a lot of other guys. And then some of the guys didn't get seasick. Well, the ship wasn't hitting too hard, but I was seasick. Mm-hmm. So I barely put my clothes on, and the Marine gunner, which is today, they don't have it in the Marine Corps. The Marine gunner, he's like an officer. He deserves a salute. Bursting, if he was infantry Marine gunner, he had a bursting bomb on his collar or on his shoulder. Mm-hmm. So you naturally have to give him a salute.
Okay.
And if he was a staff officer, which worked in the office and did handled food or clothing, he had another kind of. He was a staff, and all the Marines had staff. If they had a straight bar across underneath their V's, you knew right away they were either clerks or they handled food or they handled clothing. But if they had rockers underneath, you know they were infantry.
Okay.
Infantry. And line wire, firing at airplanes. Mm-hmm. So it took us, I think, 12 days to get down to below the equator because you had to go zigzag. Mm-hmm. Because if you were going straight, the Japanese subs would know where you're going to land. You're going, mm-hmm. They'd be waiting for you there and they'd shoot you. Mm-hmm. They'd shoot your ship.
Okay.
So you had to go zigzag, and that's why it took that much longer to get there.
Right.
I think it was 11 or 12 days.
Okay.
So after we got down there,
and where was this?
Wallace Island. All these people spoke French, and they had these not grass skirts, but cloth around them. The men and the women, and the women had their breasts covered, with their lava.
Right. Right.
And the other island, I'll get to it.
Okay.
So we were told to be careful, and they have what they call moo-moo. In other words, on account of the mosquito, this one native, his leg was just as big as his back end, all the way down to his ankle. And he washed our shirts for his clothes. And we would give him money.
Okay.
And they preferred the food because the money was taken off of them by the French government.
Okay. So food they could eat.
And food they could eat.
Right.
So they would rather have the food.
Uh-huh.
Well, we didn't have much food to give them, so you had a little bit of money, you gave money. But I used to play the mouth organ.
Okay.
And this native kid saw that mouth organ. And he wanted to give me $3 for it. And I wouldn't take the $3. I was going to give him the mouth organ because I pitied him.
Sure.
On account of his leg. And then some women, one breast would swell up. And then some guys' arms would swell up.
From these mosquitoes?
From that mosquito, yeah.
Okay.
So elephantitis, they called it. But then they gave it a medical name. And then from there, I think we had 1 or 2 raids by Jap planes. Then we went to the Gilberts. Well, in the Gilberts, Tarara was the big war, where the Navy made a mistake because when they landed there, they forgot about the shore. Time and tide. The tide would come in and bring you closer to the shore.
Right.
But the Navy really messed up. They forgot about the tide, so 500 feet, the Marines had to run, and they were being slaughtered by the Japs. Because the Japs, for 5 years or 4 years, they built bunkers, 3 feet wide, concrete, and then they bulldozed sand around it. Well, every time the ships were shooting the 18-inch and 16-inch, they would hit that sand, glance off it, and fall in the water. So the Japs were safe.
Yeah.
So all the Marines that were coming, they had to run 500 feet on that ground, sand.
Yeah.
They were being slaughtered with the machine gun.
They never had a chance.
Yeah. So we went to an island called Apamama, which was 7 miles long, and when the tide would come in, it would cut the island into 3. And the natives there, the women wore grass skirts, nothing on for their upper breast. A lot of guys were tempted. Well, after being there for 2 months, you got used to that, seeing it.
Right.
Nothing would happen.
No big deal.
No big deal. But then 2 Navy nurses came in our coveralls, white women. I don't want to go any further.
Well, on these islands, so how long did you spend on each island?
Well, the Apamama, the sea beast come later. Well, first, 27 Marines came off a submarine ahead of us because we were defense battalion. So they went first. So 1 Marine was killed, and he was buried 3 feet in the ground, sand, with a poncho. You know what a poncho is?
Yes.
Okay. And he was buried in that, 3 feet in the ground, and the Japanese officer killed all of his men with his pistol because the Marines had a reputation, that's what the Japs were taught, to kill their mother or father before they can become a Marine, or their sister or brother, or any one of their relatives.
Right.
They had to have that reputation. So a lot of those Japs told the Marines when they were captured that because the interrogation, the officers would ask them, why were you guys committing suicide? Because you Marines were noted for killing your mother and father or brother, sister, or somebody before you became a Marine. So on a lot of the islands, the civilians were even jumping off the cliff. Well, Apamama, so the first night, our 40 millimeter was on the northern part of the island. And that night, dig a little bit of foxhole. You couldn't dig it too deep because you'd be hitting water. But just a little bit of sand you piled up, and then you slept there,
Okay.
on your little bedding. And the rats would run across your stomach, or across your chest. And the first night I didn't sleep, none of us slept. None of us could sleep. So this sergeant, that they already had 42 months overseas, he says, hey, Russian, you'll get used to it. So if we saw a coconut shaking like this on the ground, we'd run real fast and kick it because we know there was a rat in it.
Yeah.
And the rat would fly out, hit the ground, and die. So we stayed there and they built, the Seabees built an airfield. So from there, they were going, because Tarara was shot up real quick. They couldn't build no airplane, airstrip there. Excuse me. I hurt that shoulder, it makes it rough. So then, after we were there for about 4 months, the Army come to relieve us. But we didn't give those natives any clothes. They came and right away they gave them T-shirts. I got pictures in there. You'll be able to see them. And then we came back to Kauai, Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were there for about 7 months or 7 or 8 months. We were getting tired of it already, you know. And I was a messman in one of the galleys, and I used a yellow and a lime, and I cleaned all the garbage cans real good, and the messman before me had slop all over the woodwork, and the woodwork was just bare, it was not painted.
Mm-hmm.
It was cut rough,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was black. So I cleaned everything up. I was the only messman got liberty.
Is that right?
I was the only messman got liberty. And Harry, that I visited down Florida just last week,
Uh-huh.
he says, "Mike, I remember that. You're the only one that got it." But he didn't know me. I knew him because he was the cook.
Okay.
But he didn't know
He
me.
didn't know you.
He said, "Was that you?" "Oh, yeah. I was the only one. Out of 20 men, I was the only one got to go to liberty."
How long was your liberty?
For one day. You
Right.
go into Kapaa
Mhm.
or Hanoi, you know, one of those towns.
Right.
So you went to the USO, you got a free soda or free milk, a free sandwich,
Mhm.
and then they had one movie. So you went to see that, and that movie stayed all week long.
If you saw it once, you saw it all.
Yeah, and then they sent me down to be the prison chaser because a lot of the Marines and sailors, they got drunk, and some of the Indians, they weren't allowed to drink. But when they went into town, you know, how did those natives know that they're Indians? So one Indian went rough. So I had to take him up in front of my battalion headquarters, in front of O'Halloran. And O'Halloran, well, he had the reputation of sneaking 5 90 millimeters on Guadalcanal, because the Japanese with their Bettys were coming so low, and the Marines didn't have nothing to shoot them. So they were coming so low, and they were bombing anywhere they wanted.
Mm.
So at night, Captain O'Halloran brought 5 90 millimeters in. Well, they can shoot like 4 or 5 miles up in the air.
Mm.
Well, they knocked out of 15 Japanese Bettys, they were called Bettys, out of 15, they knocked 5 out of the air real quick.
Oh,
Well, those Japs took off. For 3 or 4 days, they didn't come back. Well, by that time, they could put 5,000 sandbags around the 90 millimeters. So if the bomb would hit, the concussion wouldn't kill the men.
okay. So the concussion was sometimes the thing that killed
Oh
the men.
my God, the concussion could rip you apart. Oh, I forgot to tell you. On Apamama, when the Japs came with their airplane to shoot us, kill us, we naturally were firing. You don't have to point at a plane. You just shoot up in the air in front of the plane so he could run into the bullets, because the bullets would explode.
Okay.
And every bullet, every fourth one, every 40 millimeter had a tracer. But on a 20 millimeter, which was a smaller one, every fourth one was a tracer. And a 50 caliber, I think every 7th or 8th one was a tracer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see where you're shooting it.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. I'm getting a little dry around here. Oh, let me have a swig.
Go ahead. Help yourself.
I have that asbestos, so my throat starts to swell up.
Right. You can hold on to that if you like.
Jaku.
John.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So when they were bombing the first night, well, I think it was the second night, second or third, they had a direct hit into the 20 millimeter, and it cut that pedestal in half, and it killed those two guys, because two guys are on a gun crew.
Mm-hmm.
It killed them, and it smithereens.
Mm.
So when they went to pick them up, pieces here, pieces there.
Right, right.
Blood laid in the sand.
Yeah.
So one was, his name was Ralph Pappas. He come from Massachusetts. He was a Greek, and he and I got along good because I lived like League of Nations down here in Madison. So we know how to speak a little bit of Italian, a little bit of Greek and that,
Yeah.
and we could talk to the women, to the mothers.
Yeah.
So even now, when I come back and I talk to some of the Greeks, I know a little bit, and right away they say, "Mike, are you Greek?" Well, anyway, Ralph, he was married, he had 2 children, come from Massachusetts, from where my secretary come from.
Okay.
He was an Annapolis graduate. And the other kid came from the orphanage. He was 17, and he volunteered to go into the... And while we're on that subject, about 17, there was a lot of kids who went in at 17.
Okay.
But there was a lot of kids who went in when they were 13. Now that's hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
Now, the way I know this, my wife and I were up in Tennessee going to a Marine reunion. And naturally we stopped at a comfort station,
Mm-hmm.
rest place. And there's a fella, about 6'2", standing by my van, because I had Marine emblems on my van. So I'm saying to my wife, what the hell did I do? Do something wrong to some guy? He's a pretty big man. I figured maybe when I passed him up, I cut him off short or something,
Sure.
You don't know.
You don't know.
So he introduced himself. He gave me a card. He was a colonel in the Army. But when the war started, he was big for his age. He was only 13 years old. He had his mother sign the paper because he was going to get a job. Well, they were so darn poor, the mother signed it right away. And a year later, he lets his aunt know where he's at, and then they knew he was in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
But he stayed in all. Then, when he come out, he stayed 20 years in the Marine Corps. Then when he come out, but meantime he visited his mother.
Uh-huh.
Then he come out and he went into the Army, and they gave him, well, he was already a captain in the Marine Corps. So they gave him a higher rate major, and then he made colonel. So he had about 10 years in the Army, and then he come out.
Came out.
So he waited for me. So he gave me his card, and then I brought it up at the meetings, at the Marine Corps meetings, and the VFW and the American Legion. I said, just in case you guys think it's all baloney, here's a guy that gave me a card. And if you don't believe me, write a letter to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he was 13.
He was 13 when he went in.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had an organization, and they used to meet, and they had 40-some, 50-some guys, and then little by little, the guys were dying off.
Mm-hmm.
So he said there's only about 4 or 5 living, but that's about 15 years ago,
Right.
Maybe he's dead by now.
Right. Right. Right.
But he was only 13, so I'm still living. Maybe he's still living, who knows?
Right.
'Cause he's younger than I am.
Well, Mike, I'd like to go back. I'm interested to learn a little bit about your gunnery training, and then what it was like, what you were doing in those positions.
Well, what we would do during the day, they would ask for volunteers to go unload ammunition on the ships or food, and I was always volunteering for everything, because I'm hoping to meet somebody from my hometown on a ship, because I know a lot of guys were sailors.
Right.
My brother was a sailor,
Uh-huh.
so I would always volunteer, and I had to get away from the gun crew. So then the Sergeant Pitts, who came from Wells Fargo, North Dakota, he said to me, hey, Russian, well, they called me Russian because, I forgot to tell you. On Apamama, they thought the Japs were going to throw gas on us. So they had us drill with gas mask on, but the guy that was counting cadence, he didn't have a mask on. So here we are marching in a 90-degree weather, you know, sweating like a dickens, you know,
Yeah.
especially with that rubber on your face, sweating all over. So after 3 guys counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, hip 2, 3, 4, hip, no, tip, hoop, 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 you know, you had to march, keeping time. So then it came my turn. So the sergeant says, "Hey, Russian, it's your turn to count cadence." So everybody put their gas mask on. So I waited there. Attention, forward, march, hip, 2, 3, 4. Jeden, dva, tri, četiri, jeden, dva, tri, četiri. I counted in Slavish. And everybody bust out laughing. They fell on the ground, took their mask off, and the sergeant says, no, not Sergeant Pitts, but the other sergeant had 3 stripes underneath. He said, "The Russian is right. Who in the hell wants a close order drill in a 90-degree weather?
Mm-hmm.
If the Japs are going to throw gas on us, we're going to hide."
Right.
You know.
Right.
So the word got around.
Okay. Okay.
So everybody on board ship would not be there unloading ammunition. "Hey, Russian, how do you count for gas mass rate?" So I was teaching them, jeden, dva, tri, četiri, jeden, dva, tri, četiri. So all the words got around, and then they says, one was an Indian, he was a Cherokee's Indian, and he had eyes just like an eagle. Boy, when he looked at you like that, man, you'd swear, you knew he was an Indian, and he was tan complected.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Hey, Russian, let me see how you write your name in Russian." Well, where my dad come from, Austria-Hungary, and my father-in-law came from Strabichowa, which was only about 3 kilometers away from where my dad come from. And where my dad come from, the island was called, the village was called Almas, which means apple orchard in Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's called Jablonka in Slavish, because it's in Ukraine. The Ukraine took over. Our people never owned their own country. They never owned it. They were slaves to the Hungarians for 1,000 years. That's why they knew how to speak Hungarian. So anyway, I'm getting too far away from myself.
We were talking about
Apamama.
Yeah.
So then later we left that island, came back to Kauai. But I did forget to tell you that we were marching with gas masks.
Right.
Who in the hell heard about marching if they would drop gas, we'd try to hide somewhere.
Right.
You know.
Sure. Where did you get your artillery training?
Well,
gunnery training.
Before I went overseas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And that was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Brick buildings and everything.
So,
and now they're tearing those buildings down.
So every island you went on, you were the defense.
We were defense up until we went into Apamama. Then we were on the offense. But we still had the seacoast batteries, which it took 4 men to put that round into the breech blocks,
Mm-hmm.
and then close it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it fired, it would shake the whole island. It would shake it. That was called seacoast back 155, and they were like 10 feet long.
Okay.
Now they got 155s. They only have a barrel about 2 feet long,
Right.
2.5 feet long.
So were you shooting at the planes a lot? Did you get a lot of
No.
action?
We did, yes. Not a lot, because this island was, well, like I said, Apamama was 7 miles long, but when the tide come in, it cut it up into 3.
Right.
So we had to hurry up, get our trucks across the island before the tide would come in, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because the water would get into the motor
Mm-hmm.
and engine, and then you stall right in the middle of the tide.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and then we went to Kauai, And a lot, as I was chasing prisoners, Marines, and I would let them smoke only when we went away from the camps. There were 6 camps there, 6 battalions. And I would let them smoke. But this one Italian guy from Brooklyn, New York, Benito, he was a short fella, he would keep a stogie in his mouth, never light it, but keep it in his mouth and then spit, you know. And if anybody would come by, his lip would go over the stogie and you wouldn't even know he had it. So this one rebel from Tennessee and these 2 guys from Michigan. All of a sudden we're in the officers' area, but all the officers and the Marines were out training. So I was very fortunate. All of a sudden I look, they're smoking. I hollered, okay, smoking lamps out. That's a Navy term. Because on a board ship, when they say smoking lamps lit, then you can light up a cigarette or a pipe or whatever, cigar. But when they say smoking lamps out, you can do nothing.
Okay.
So anyway, they hurry up and put their cigarettes out, and I said, on the double, fall in. And hip, 2, 3, 4, hip, 2, 3, 4. We marched out there on the double. So we got down by the spring, where the little waterway was, and irrigation. Well, it was for the pineapples, and it was irrigation for the sugar cane. So I marched them down there. I said, okay, fall out. I said, what the hell are you guys trying to do to me? Put me in a break? And this rebel from Tennessee, about 6'4", well, Russian, if you're going to let Benito have a cigar in his mouth, we can smoke anytime we want. I said, what the hell's the matter with you guys? Don't I let you have liberty? And you're not supposed to go to get seconds in the chow line, and I let you guys go get seconds? I would say, from now on, we're going to do Navy rocks and shoals. When I holler halt, you got to fold your hands like this. All they can see is the ground. And everything was on a double. And then we went to chow, to eat chow. 2 of them got up because they want to go up for seconds. Sit down. I said, you're not going for seconds. I said, all 4 of you, you're going to wash your musket, dip them in the water, and then put them on a pile. And I had to get strict with them. And then I got disgusted. Excuse me. I got disgusted because the gun crew I was supposed to be on, in 4 seconds, they can put a 40 millimeter down from a traveling position. Wheels, just like on a car. They can put it down in the firing position if they have to,
Right.
in case the jet planes come over. In 4 seconds. My God, I want to get back in there because I'll be dumb. Well, being that I missed out on that, I went up to the lieutenant there and fired him. He became a doctor after the war, but he was from Iowa, and he was a new lieutenant, first time overseas. So I told him, I'm Mike Yusko, PFC Mike Yusko, and when we came to Wallace Island, all these guys were PFCs. They 46 months, 44 months, 42 months overseas. I was ashamed to put my chevron on. So one of the sergeants says, hey, Russian, if you're ashamed to wear your chevron, I'll give it to one of the guys that deserve it. So I had to sew it on because it paid $4 a month more. And $4 was a lot of money.
Sure.
You can go to a restaurant, order a steak for maybe $5, you know.
Right.
So $4 was a lot of money.
Right.
So anyway, going back, so we were in Kauai, Hawaii, and then he told me, well, I'll get you off. So the next day they had me off. I just didn't want that job. And Ellis, he was part Indian, he took over my job. And boy, he's marching those guys on a Sunday. Rip march, rip march. It's real fast. You turn around real fast. And they'd be bumping into one another. And he would like crucifying them. 2 weeks later, who the hell's in the prison, in the brig? Alice. We hollered, hey Alice, you was a drill instructor and now what are you, a marching Marine? You know what he told us? Well, he swore at us. I brought that up to him, but not in front of his wife. His kid, 2 kids were in the Marine Corps too also. He says, yeah, Mike, I relieved you for 2 weeks and I gave those guys hell and all of a sudden I'm marching with them.
That's how it happens.
Yeah.
Well, so you were in the military for 2 years, about 2 years?
No, I was altogether 35 and a half months.
Okay.
35 and a half months.
Okay, and
when the
the war had ended. Well, you were still in the
Then
military.
we went to Okinawa.
Okay.
And then the ship, the battle wagon, the biggest one we had, Maryland was the biggest one, 18-inch. Well, they were shooting over our heads because they were told to shoot, and they can go 18 miles. So they over our heads, and you can hear that big bullets going over our head. And I made a dumb remark. I said, I hope a flock of birds aren't flying there. Hit that bullet, and it would fall down.
Yeah.
And one of the guys says, hey, you dumb Russian. That bullet would carry all them birds with it.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we moved up from Nago. We moved up to Yontan, where a lot of fighting was going on. And they were killing the Japs there. And then the village was empty. The natives were in like a compound, governed by the government, our government. And they had our guards, or army guards there. And 2 guys, finally they built a hospital below our gun crew. So we had to protect the hospital. And they were made out of pyramidal tents. Excuse me. Ever since I had that asthma, that thing, my nose runs. So anyway, 2 of the soldier boys from the hospital went into that village to find some kind of a trinket, some kind of a souvenir, because dishes or something, And all these huts were grass huts, but they were really strong, bamboo made with they were real strong. Well, anyway, one of these soldier boys kills a goat, and that goat just delivered a baby kid that morning. So I says, I'm going down there, and 4 of my buddies says, hey, Russian, you crazy? They're liable to shoot you. Well, at that time, I didn't give a damn, You just got wacky,
Yeah.
So I went down there with my rifle, and I says, if any of you 2 got any funny idea, I got 4 men with their rifles watching me. I said, but you guys are going to write home now that you killed the mother goat, and she just delivered a baby kid this morning. So the one guy got pretty much ashamed. The other guy, he got a little arrogant with me. I said, be careful, fella, because you may not go home. And that's all I said to him. So he knew what I meant. So I picked up the baby goat, took him up to my gun crew, and naturally we had coffee, so we had canned milk. Not Silver Cow, but the other, Carnation. So I put the Carnation milk into this canteen cup of mine that's right on with your canteen, you know. And then I put a little bit of water in there. And being that I lived on a farm during the present time with my aunt and uncle, which they only had to pay $4 a month rent. There was 3 hunky families lived on that farm, $12 a month rent, so they paid only $4. And even they couldn't even come up with that pay. That's how bad times were during the Depression. So anyway, I learned how to feed a calf. You put your little finger in there like that, and you put a little bit of that water and milk on it, you know, and then you lit on its tongue a little bit, and then you draw its head, and it will, you know, follow, and then it goes in the canteen. So that's how that goat was drinking it. So we happened to see a moving picture of Mihailovich. Mihailovich was a Croatian fighting with the Germans. And then when he found out what the Germans were doing to all the people, then Mihailovich was a Czechnik, a Croatian soldier, and then he started to fight against the Germans. So we saw that picture, moving picture, so all my buddies named that goat Mihailovich. So I had him for about 4 or 5 months, and he got big. And he would be eating grass, and I would be a volunteer to go work on a ship or unload a ship or something, or maybe do something down the CP. And Mihailovich would be eating grass, and I'd say, "Hey, Mihailovich, poj sюда, come over here," in Slavish. And he'd come running. Sometime he would run with his back end in front of his front end. He would run sideways. And he'd come up to my pocket, because I was smoking at that time. I started when I was 19. Cigarettes were free, so I started smoking. I was told by my sergeant, if you start smoking, the mosquitoes won't bite you. They bit me anyway.
Yeah, they did.
And other guys would sit bareback, and mosquitoes wouldn't bother them, but they bothered me. So he would come to this pocket, nibble on this pocket. I'd pull out the pack of cigarettes. I'd feed him one, he'd eat it. I'd feed him the other one, he'd eat it. Then he'd go to my other pocket. He knew I had some Lifesaver candies there. I'd give him one, he'd chew it up. Then I'd give him another one, chew it up, swallow it, and that was it. Every day, like that. Now comes the time the war's over. Well, before that happened, we had a major by the name of Maddox. And everybody was saying that something is slipping in his mind. And he was training us to go when we're going to go to Japan, because the women were going to shoot at us. Everybody's going to shoot at us. So we have to kill everybody. So he says, we're going to go there. And then he decides to have mass, and he puts out an order from corporal on up, have to attend services. So he would go to the ship and get one of the Protestant ministers. And they would have, now all our Polish, Slavish, Italian guys that are Roman Catholics, they want to go to their own mass, the Roman Catholic Mass. Well, I had to go to the Roman Catholic Mass because they didn't have no Byzantine Catholic, you know. In fact, one of the not minister, but chaplain, he said, "I never heard of your religion." I said, "Well, you Roman Catholics have blinders on you. You only see the Pope, and that's all. But our religion was started by a queen in Constantinople, which is no longer there, Constantinople. But and Cyril and Methodius, you heard of them?
Yes.
I don't know if you heard of it. Cyril and Methodius. Well, their mother was Slavish, and their father was Greek. So, and I had an argument with Mr. Lutz one time in Yukon, Pennsylvania, on a farm, because he was a cantor of our Byzantine Catholic. but he didn't like the idea that our religion changed into English. He says, the meaning is not there anymore. It has to be Russian. I said, wait a while, Mr. Lutz. Before it became Russian, it was Jewish, Greek. And then from the Greeks, they had to learn Jewish in order to be interpret from the Jewish language to the Greek language, because a lot of our alphabet is from Greek. And they have 4 letters missing, and A is one of them. So when this sergeant asked me to write my name in Russian, it's Y-U-S-K-O with a little rocker on top, and that's the A, means Yusko. And Yusko means Joseph in Ukrainian or Slavish. Mm. So that's what that Indian, when he said to me, write it down in Russian, Mike, and I wrote it down with that little rocker on it. Right. He says, well, I said, that's the way when my dad came to this country, in Wallace Island, they knocked that little rocker off, you know. Mm-hmm. So is my 2 hours up?
We're just about ready to wrap up here.
Okay, because exactly. I put 50 cents on the meter.
Yeah, I was going to. I did want to interrupt you, but is there anything in closing that you would like to say about your life in the military, very briefly?
I respect the military very much, and any man that goes to the military, I throw him a salute. And I met a lot of people, and we had 38 years of Marine reunions, and when I wore my 1775 Continental Marine uniform, that's brass buckles on the shoes, white stockings, knickers, and a sword. Mm-hmm. I'll show you pictures of it. And I wore it for 18 years. And then I have the highest respect, and my son was in the Army, and then he wished he went into the Marine Corps, and then he come out after serving in Korea. He come out, and then when he lost his job at the steel mill in Fairless, he went back into the Army. He had a job, but they weren't paying enough, but they were sending him all over 4 states to do a lot of work. Right. Well, all his time was traveling. So he went back into the Army. So he went to Iraq twice. Okay. He was there twice. Okay. And now he's got about 21 years altogether. So he's going to come out. And I can honestly say, military veterans, I buried over 489 veterans. This last one that from our outfit, I didn't bury him because I was in Florida, and they buried him. He was a good Marine. He wasn't in World War II. And I always tell people, when my time comes to bury me, they'll probably say, Mike Yusko, who?
I doubt that. Well, Mr. Yusko, this has been a very interesting time, and we appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us. And on behalf of our country, thank you for your service to our country. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. You want to look at